Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome to your channel The Anatomy Canvas. In today's class of the neuroanatomy, we are going to discuss with the features of the medulla oblongata. So in previous class we have discussed the external features of the medulla oblongata, and the learning outcome for the today's class are to describe the transverse section of the medulla at the level of the sensory decussation, the motor decussation and the inferior olivary nuclear complex, and also enumerate the cranial nerve nuclei which are present within the medulla. So internal structure of the medulla can be discussed at the four levels, that is at the level of the pyramidal decussation or corticospinal decussation, at the level of the major sensory decussation just above the pyramidal decussation, at the lower bones, at the lower level part, which is the open part of the medulla, and at the cranial most part of the medulla. So these are the four level, and we will discuss the internal structure of the medulla oblongata at all of these levels. So first we will discuss the internal structure at the pyramidal decussation. So these are the two sections of the medulla oblongata. This section is taken just rostral to the spinomedullary junction, where just most caudal part of the corticospinal tract has started to decussate, and this section is taken at the level of the pyramidal decussation. So we will see the differences in both of these sections. First have a look at most anterior part. You can see these are the pyramids which are present over here, and the most caudal part of the pyramidal tract has started to decussate over here. In this section you can see the medullary pyramids which are present over here, and the pyramidal decussation has taken place. 90% of the fiber crosses to the opposite side and they descend at the lateral corticospinal tract, while almost 10% of the fiber do not cross. They descend as uncrossed fibers as the anterior corticospinal tract. So this one is the pyramid and the cortical decussation. Next you can see here you can see the medial longitudinal fasciculus, and this medial longitudinal fasciculus is pushed little bit laterally because of the decussating fibers of the pyramidal tract. Then you can see the anterior horn of the spinal cord. It is related to those area of the spinal cord. Here the somatic motor neurons are present, and the somatic motor neurons in medulla oblongata over here represents the nuclei for the ventral root of the cervical nerve C1, and the nucleus for the spinal part of the accessory nerve. The spine here, these two nuclear groups are present, and at the anterior and the lateral margin of this anterior horn over here also you can see the vestibulospinal tract is present. This is the anterior and lateral margin. Next is this is the central gray matter, which has increased in amount over here. This is the central canal. Here you can see the spinal tract of the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve and tract of the trigeminal nerve. Also you can see over here, this one is the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve and its tract. Both of these structure represents the substantia gelatinosa of the spinal cord and the dorsolateral tract of the leishor, which have been replaced over here in the medulla oblongata by the spinal trigeminal nucleus and spinal trigeminal tract. And also because of the decussating fibers of the pyramidal tract, the connection between the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve and the anterior horn has been lost, and this area will form the reticular formation. Next we move on to a very important structure. Here you can see this is the fasciculus gracilis and the fasciculus cuneatus which are present over here. In this level you can see the nucleus gracile and the cuneate nucleus both have appeared. These are the nuclei of the second order neuron. The first order neurons relay over here in these areas, and second order neurons started to appear over here. Also you can see that after this nucleus cuneatus, the cuneate accessory cuneate nuclei will be present over here, and also you can see the other tracts which are present in this. These are the posterior spinocerebellar, the anterior spinocerebellar tract which is present over here. So again I repeat, from the anterior to the posterior in the midline, first we can see these are the medullary pyramids. Then we can see the medial longitudinal fasciculus and the pyramidal decussation, which have pushed the medial longitudinal fasciculus to slightly laterally. Then in the center we can see the central gray matter which is present, and then we can see the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. In the area over here you can see the nucleus for the cervical spinal nerve first, which is the supraspinal nucleus, and also the nucleus for the spinal part of the accessory nerve which are present. At the anterior and the lateral corner of the anterior horn we can see the vestibulospinal tract, and in the lateral funiculus we can see the posterior spinocerebellar and anterior spinocerebellar tract. Here you can see this area represents the lateral corticospinal tract, with the fibers after decussation they descend as lateral corticospinal tract. In this area we can see the spinothalamic tract which are present over here, and these are the level of the pyramidal decussation. This is the pyramidal tract. We can see these are the pyramids which are present. Almost 75 to 90% fiber crosses to the opposite side in the decussation and they descend as the lateral corticospinal tract. The remaining 10% fibers we do not crosses, and either they descend as the anterior corticospinal tract, and some of these fibers also descend along with the lateral corticospinal tract. So this is the pyramidal tract. Now we see the next level, that is at the level of the meniscal decussation or the major sensory decussation. So again we can see the first these are the pyramid, and next to this is the here you can see the medial longitudinal fasciculus. The first appearance of the inferior olivary nucleus you can see over here, and then this is the reticular formation. This is the central gray matter. Here you can see the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus have increased in size. Almost the fasciculus gracilis is absent, and few fibers of the fasciculus cuneatus are present over here. Most of the fibers have relayed upon their nuclei, and then they descend and then they cross to the opposite side, forming the internal arcuate fiber, and then they ascend as the medial lemniscus. So this is the level of the decussation of the medial lemniscus. These are the internal arcuate fibers, and this is the nucleus gracilis, nucleus cuneatus. The fasciculus gracilis almost have disappeared because the fibers have relayed upon their nuclei, and fasciculus cuneatus almost over here disappeared. Another nuclei which is present over here is the accessory cuneate nucleus. This accessory cuneate nucleus is representative of the dorsal nucleus of the Clark, which is present in the spinal cord, and this accessory cuneate nucleus represents the fibers which carry the sensation from the upper limb, from the upper thoracic and cervical level, and these fibers form the cuneo-cerebellar tract which enter through the inferior cerebellar peduncle into the cerebellum. So this is the accessory cuneate nucleus, and the fibers which form over here are the posterior external arcuate fibers. So these are the internal arcuate fibers, and these are the posterior external arcuate fibers which arises from the accessory cuneate nucleus, and then they enter through the inferior cerebellar peduncle into this cerebellum. Here you can see the reticular formation which is present over here. Also you can see the hypoglossal nerve nucleus which is present over here, and here you can see the dorsal nucleus of the vagus which have now appeared. So I repeat again, from the anterior to the posterior aspect, these are the pyramids which are present. The inferior olivary nuclear complex have appeared. This is the decussation of the medial lemniscus. Here you can see the medial longitudinal fasciculi which are present over here. Again you can see over here these are the medial longitudinal fasciculus. This one is the medial accessory olivary nucleus along with the inferior olivary nucleus. In the center you can see the central gray matter. Here you can see the hypoglossal nerve nucleus, then the vagal nucleus. These are the internal arcuate fibers, and the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus, and the accessory cuneate nucleus. In the lateral funiculus you can see this is the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve along with its nucleus. Here you can see the spinocerebellar tracts, both anterior and posterior, are present over here. Here you can see the spinothalamic tract, which is present over here. So this is all about the level of the medulla oblongata at the level of the major sensory decussation. Another very important structure you can notice over here, this is the arcuate nucleus. This arcuate nucleus is considered as the distally displaced pontine nuclei, which are present just anterior anterolateral to the pyramids. So these are the distally displaced pontine nucleus, the arcuate nucleus, and fibers arising from these arcuate nucleus form the anterior arcuate fibers. So there are the three different arcuate fibers. These are internal arcuate fiber, which are related to the lemniscal system, the major sensory system. These are, here you can see the posterior external arcuate fibers, which are related to the accessory cuneate nucleus, and here you can see the arcuate nucleus along with the anterior external arcuate fibers, which will be present over here. So this is the spinal trigeminal tract. It's complex. The nerve roots enters the brainstem at the mid-pontine levels, and they enter and they relay in the nucleus. So you can see in the medulla, this is the spinal trigeminal nucleus and its a tract. As the fibers descend, the fibers relay in their nuclei, and the number of the fibers decreases in the spinal trigeminal tract. Also you can see there is a somatotopic arrangement of the fibers. The fibers of the mandibular division, which are present in the spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve, are most posterior. Fibers of the ophthalmic division are most anterior, and fibers from the maxillary division are intermediate between these two. So this is the spinal trigeminal tract, which enters at the mid-pontine levels, and then the fibers relay in the nuclei. So this is the cross section of the medulla at the lower open part of the medulla oblongata. Here you can see the cavity of the central canal has now been opened and forming the floor of the fourth ventricle. The three very important swelling you can notice over here. The first, the most medial swelling is the hypoglossal trigone, which is because of the nucleus of the hypoglossal nerve. Next to this is the vagal trigone, which is because of the nucleus of the dorsal nucleus of the vagus nerve, and most lateral swelling is the vestibular trigone, which is because of the vestibular nuclear complex. In the center, you can see this is the medial longitudinal fasciculus, the tectospinal tract, which is present over here. Then you can see the medial lemniscus and then the pyramids. Here you can see the inferior olivary nuclear complex, which are present. Here you can see the inferior cerebellar peduncle, which has now been appeared over here. You can see the first appearance of the inferior cerebellar peduncle over here. In the center also you can notice the reticular formation and the dorsal, the two other nuclei which are present over here. This is the dorsal accessory olivary nucleus, and in this area you can see the medial accessory olivary nucleus. So three nuclear complexes. The inferior olivary nuclear complex is the largest one, and the smaller one is the dorsal accessory nuclear complex, and another is the medial accessory olivary nuclear complex. So these nuclei are very important. They are related to the extrapyramidal system. The fibers rising from the cortex forming the cortico-olivary tract, fibers from the red nucleus forming the rubro-olivary tract, and fibers from the periaqueductal gray matter, they all coming to the inferior olivary nucleus fibers, and then they enter into the cerebellum via the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So here you can see this. So this olivary nuclear complex is related to the extrapyramidal system. This is the cross section, and this is the diagrammatic presentation of these cross sections. So this is the floor of the fourth ventricle. Here you can see the hypoglossal trigone, the vagal trigone, and the vestibular trigone. In this area, these are the different vestibular nuclear complexes which are present over here. This one is the medial, this one is in yellow, smaller one is the posterior, and this larger in blue color is the inferior vestibular nuclear complex. Also you can see over here, this is the spinal tract and the nucleus of the trigeminal nerve over here, which is present, and this is the lateral spinothalamic tract on both sides. You can appreciate it. This is the anterior spinocerebellar tract. These areas are the pyramid, and here you can see the arcuate fibers, and here you will see the external anterior arcuate fibers which will be present. The arcuate nucleus and the external anterior arcuate fiber. In the center you can see the medial longitudinal fasciculus, then the tectospinal tract, and then the medial lemniscus. In this diagram also you can see the different changes. So this is the hypoglossal triangle, the vagal triangle, and the vestibular nuclear complex. The difference, and also you can see the inferior cerebellar peduncle over here. This is the anterior cochlear nuclear group which is present over here, and these are the anterior spinocerebellar pathways. This one is the inferior olivary nuclear complex, is dorsal accessory olivary nuclear complex, and medial accessory olivary nuclear complex. So these are the three are the part of the inferior olivary nucleus complex. Also you can see deeply embedded in the reticular formation is the nucleus ambiguus, which is present over here. So these are the different features of the medulla oblongata at the level of the inferior olivary complex, also called the lower open part of the medulla oblongata. This is the differences between the caudal part of the fourth ventricle and uppermost part of the fourth ventricle. This one resembles the previous because it is the same level. You can say it is also say it is the level of the inferior olivary complex. So this is the inferior olivary complex. Here you can see the dorsal accessory olivary nucleus and also the medial accessory olivary nucleus which is present. These are the pyramids, the arcuate nucleus, and the external arcuate, anterior arcuate fibers which are present over here. Here you can see the fibers of the hypoglossal nerve and the nucleus of the hypoglossal nerve. This in the center is the medial longitudinal fasciculus, the tectospinal tract, and this is the medial lemniscus, medial lemniscus, the tectospinal tract, and medial longitudinal fasciculus. And over here you can see the hypoglossal triangle. So few of the changes which are present over here, that the accessory nucleus at this level have almost disappeared. Only the inferior olivary nucleus you can see. The dorsal accessory and medial accessory also disappear over here. Also the vestibular, the inferior vestibular nuclei which you can see over here, which is present between the medial vestibular nuclei and the cerebellar peduncle, it is now replaced over here by the lateral. Over here you can see the dorsal cochlear nucleus, and also replaced by the lateral vestibular nucleus complex. You can see over here this is the lateral vestibular nucleus complex which replaces the dorsal inferior vestibular nucleus. So there are the three basically vestibular nuclei: the inferior vestibular, the medial, and the lateral. So inferior vestibular nuclear is replaced by the lateral one. So these are the small changes which are present at the uppermost part of the medulla oblongata, where that is the open part of the medulla oblongata. So these changes, I repeat, the dorsal accessory and the medial accessory nucleus almost disappear, and the inferior medullary inferior vestibular nucleus has been replaced by the lateral vestibular nucleus. Rest of the things are the same at both the levels. This is the section showing you the different position of the different cranial nuclei over here. So this is the at the level of the midbrain, the oculomotor, kilomotor and trochlear nerve. In the pons you can see the trigeminal motor nucleus and the abducent nerve nucleus and the facial nucleus. Here you can see these are the superior salivatory and the inferior salivatory nucleus. So in medulla oblongata you can see this one is the nucleus of the tractus solitarius, and behind this you can see the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. In the center you can see the most medial is the hypoglossal nucleus, then you can see the dorsal nucleus of the vagus, and then you can see the nucleus ambiguous which are present. So most medial is the hypoglossal, then dorsal nucleus of the vagus, and then the nucleus ambiguous which is present over here. This is another section on the side view showing you the different nuclear complexes which are present in the medulla and the bones. So you can see the most anterior one is the inferior olivary complex you can see over here. Then you can see over here this is the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, and this one is the nucleus ambiguous. Then you can see this is the spinal trigeminal nucleus which is present. This is the hypoglossal nucleus, and then the dorsal motor nucleus of the 10th nerve. So this is inferior olivary complex. You can see the nucleus ambiguous, the spinal trigeminal nucleus, then the hypoglossal nucleus, the nucleus of the vagus nerve, and here you can see the salivatory nucleus which are present. So these are the different nuclei which are present in the medulla oblongata and their location as well. And here I complete my today's class. These are the references: the Carpenter Human Neuroanatomy, the 9th edition, and Gray's Anatomy by the Susan Strandrings, the 40th edition. Thank you very much for your attention for the today's class, and Allah Hafiz till the next class.